Hi, everyone. This is Dee. Welcome back to Eternal Evolution of Self. I have another beautiful guest with me today. This is Jen. Jen, hi, and welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in this world.
Hi, Dee. Thank you for inviting me. First of all, I'm really excited to be here because I believe that when we share our stories, someone will benefit, someone will take that away and have a positive impact in their life. So why did I say yes? We were actually talking about what is success when we chatted before. And I have a story where I did everyone else's life goals. I had that story. That was who I was. But I want to talk to you a little bit about what happens when you achieve that success by everybody else's standards, because it almost ruined my life, honestly. And I think that's a story that needs to be told. Is that something that would be beneficial?
Yeah, because I don't think most people think about success as something that could mess things up for you. So I think that's great.
Yeah. So a background on me, I come from sports medicine. I love athletes. I was an athlete, and I wanted to help people to become the very best that they could, physiologically speaking. And, I did that. I'm the girl who, if you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to say, let me show you. But long story short, I did all the career goals. I had the practice. I was working with professional Olympic athletes, and I had the house and the kid and the family and all the thing that is most people's life goals. In fact, my peers would come to me and go, one day, Jen, I'm going to grow up and be just like you. But the reality is when we're in healthcare, we put on that happy face and we do what we need to do to take care of everybody else. But we put ourselves on the back burner. So everybody else is more important. My daughter was more important. My patients were more important. My coworkers were more important. If I was sick, I still showed up at work because I couldn't put my team out. There's a real culture around, not talking about your own personal problems and putting the happy face on for everyone else. And I would do this. And for anybody who doesn't know this, like, sports medicine might sound like a real illustrious career, but it's grueling. It's like 60 and 70 hours a week. It's still very, it's medicine. You're working with people who are in pain. It's very trying on your body, on your emotions. And I would get home at the end of the day and my family would be asleep. My husband would be asleep. My daughter would be asleep. And I would literally go into my closet and like cry because I had nothing left and my body was in pain. I didn't take care of myself. But one day, and this was about 8 years ago now, my husband and I finally got a vacation and we flew halfway around the world to go to a private island, and we were going to rekindle our romance. It was going to be amazing. It was like you had to hop on a flight to an island, then catch a boat to get to this island because it was so remote.
Nice.
And so we finally get there and it's beautiful. It's paradise. And we sit down to dinner. And the first thing that my husband says is, Jen, this isn't working. I think we need to think about a divorce.
Wow.
And you want to talk about a gut check? Like, I was like, I didn't see it coming. I was rekindling our romance. I was finally getting a week with just my husband, which had never happened in the history of like Jen. But, like, I didn't see it coming and I had no idea. And he said, it's not that I don't love you. It's not that we don't have that. It's that you have nothing left for me. And I can't watch you deteriorate as a human being. I can't watch you not take care of yourself and not have anything left for me. And so, like, it was very hard. We had all the things. I mean, I had a successful career. I'm like 6-figure earner, like all the things that people are like, wow, I want to be you. And I was about to lose the thing that mattered most to me, which was, I mean, he's my person. Like, he's my person. And so I had to make a major change and I had to really reflect. I got a coach. That's when I first got a coach. And I became a coach because my coach helped me to learn how to prioritize myself and
Mhm.
fill my cup, regardless of what anything was. And it started with, what do you define as success? And I was raised that success is a happy family and it's about the people and experience in your lives. It's not about the things. So I had
Right.
all these things that meant nothing to me. And I was about to lose what mattered most. And so I kind of wanted to tell that story because so many people are aspiring and climbing that mountain for, I want to be the millionaire or the 10 millionaire or whatever it is from a monetary standpoint. I don't want the big house or the things. But the reality is that was somebody else's version of success. It wasn't mine. And I think that it's a story that needs to be told, which, spoiler alert, like, my husband and I are still together. We have the best relationship we've ever had. I left medicine completely, which I worked my whole life for, and became a coach because it is so important that we know who we are, what our purpose is, and we are living that and pointing towards, like, our North Star. Our goals can't be someone else's version of success. It has to be what is success or ideal life for ourselves. And so, like, it's changed. I've turned that around. I love my life. I have the best life. I couldn't even have known to ask for the life that I have now, but it's so important when you set goals to really dive in and know, what does that mean for you? And if you get success, what does that mean? Because sometimes you get there and you do all this work and climb this mountain only to find out that you don't have a view of beauty. You have a view of, like, the sulfur pit.
Right. The inside of a closet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the inside of a closet, like sitting in paradise. Literally, we were on a private island. I'm like on a private island, bawling my eyes out. And that's not what that was supposed to be at all.
Right. Right. So that moment was the moment that you realized you needed to start taking care of yourself. So was that
Yeah.
encounter, that experience, conversation with your husband at the beginning, that was at the beginning of your trip, right?
It was the
So
first day. Yeah.
the first day. So how did that play out over the rest of your trip? Just for, I'm sure, I know I'm wondering, like, was it kind of a thing where you just kind of learned over that vacation with him how to take care of yourself again, the importance of that, and then y'all reconnected on that vacation, or was it something that happened later after you got a coach?
So it was both. And that's a yes and question. So when that happened, I mean, it was brutal. And it's an island where there's only like 6 other couples. So of course everybody was looking at us because dinner is at a certain time. I'm bawling, like, we're
Oh,
having this, conversation, but I don't believe in going to bed upset or
right.
angry. And so I said, you know what? Let's use this time so that we can reconnect, so we can find out what it is that we need mutually. Because, I mean, let's be real. He's a workaholic too. And
Yeah.
so, it goes both ways. And a lot of times when people present something to you, it's also like, I believe that all judgment is self-judgment. So when
Mm,
we see things in other people, a lot of time it's a reflection of the things that we're unhappy with about
yes.
ourselves. And I believe that forever. And so, we used this. I said, let's take this time. And the question that I asked, and it's funny because I don't talk about this often, but the question that I asked him was, how can I love you better? And I don't
Mm,
think we ask that enough. A lot of times we think about it from our own perspective and say, I wish you would do this for me.
yes.
But I started with, how could I love you better? Because obviously I was doing all the things to set us up because he stressed about money. So I'm like, well, I've made this financial success for the family. You don't have to ever worry about money. But for him, it was, I need you to not be in pain. I need to not be worried about you at the end of the day. And I need you to have time for me and for us to do the things that we, to talk and to connect, and that human side of it, which quite frankly, we were both too tired to
Mm,
do. And so it kind of was this snowball effect that led to that. And so we started having those conversations on the beach while we're paddling. There's sea turtles, whatever, because there was no distraction.
yeah.
And I'm gonna say that in today's world, we are so distracted. And if
Yes.
you've got a screen on or a phone in your face when you're connecting with somebody, that's not real connection. And that's what our connection had become, because we were both in our own space and I had nothing left. I was emotionally deficient at the end of the day. I was in compassion fatigue. I didn't even know that was a thing back then, and burnout. But, we started to learn what were the ways that we could fill our cup. Because for me, it was important that I was able to be there for him, but it also was about, I needed to take care of my body. So we did like
Right.
massage and different movements to figure out what felt good in this new stage of life. Because I'm going to be real, I was a soccer player and beating stuff up was my MO to release stress. But when you're in your upper 30s and early 40s, that's not necessarily the best stress relief anymore. Sometimes you need to have some gentle yoga flows or something else
Right.
that feed your soul. So we use that as kind of a jumping ground. And then the coaching really is what helped me to get more in tune with myself, because what happened for me was I was trying to set up the successful life goals
Mhm.
for the family, but my family didn't operate that way. That wasn't what my daughter needed or what my husband needed or what I needed. And so we had to really take a step back and say, okay, what is it that we want? What do we want our life to look like? And coaching helped me to figure out who I was again, because I didn't know. I had lost sight of that. I didn't even know
Right.
what brought me joy. Coach asked me, what brings you joy? I'm like, nothing. Like I was that burned out. Like I couldn't even
Wow.
figure out who I was anymore. And
Mhm.
so, we did the discovery in the trip, and then coaching really helped me to see that, because one of the things, and I'm a coach, but it's because I was coached and I'm a product of the work, and it was so impactful for me. But we can't see ourselves objectively, like ever. We simply cannot. And that other set of eyes and that accountability and kick in the pants. Hey, Jen, you're talking about for somebody else. No, what does it mean if there's not another human being on earth? Money is no object, location is no object, no other human being to serve. Like, what would you do?
Yeah.
And I couldn't answer that for like 3 weeks. It took me forever to figure out what would I do. It became very obvious after time. I love water. I love nature. So I
Yeah.
would go and kayak or hike or do that kind of thing. But it took
Right.
me 3 weeks and coaching to even uncover that.
Wow.
So it was a yes and for me.
So the things that you discovered that you enjoyed, were those rediscoveries or were those new discoveries to you?
Yeah, so they were kind of rediscoveries. And, it was interesting because I grew up with my grandpa, like my parents worked, and I spent all my summers and a lot of my weekends with my grandparents. And like my grandfather, he was a farmer and a fisherman.
Oh,
So I
nice.
spent all my time on the water, right? And with him, or, around water, or actually doing the gardening with him. And then we would harvest. And the other thing, and this is a huge part of who I am, is when we would have enough for the family, we would literally take those vegetables or whatever we harvested and go and deliver them to the elderly people in the neighborhood.
That's
And my grandfather was elderly, but we would go to those who didn't necessarily have company. And part of what it was bringing them joy and conversation with a gift of food. And so I didn't realize how impactful that was on me and how it shaped me, because part of what, like, who I am as a human being now, when I got to the crux of it, I believe I'm here on earth because every man, woman, and child has a birthright
yeah.
to quality nutrition and clean water and the ability to improve their quality of life. And part of that is connection and all of the things, but true holistic health. And it came from my childhood. So it was a
Mhm.
rediscovery in some aspects. And it also was an evolution of what does that mean for me? Because I don't want to garden. That's
Yeah.
not where I best serve, but I want to connect with people and help them find what is their, like, what is it that feeds their soul so that they can live in purpose and have that impact in the world where we were met. And so it kind of was a beautiful rediscovery mixed with evolution of everything that I had become.
Mhm. That's amazing. And in hindsight, do you look back over the time when you were creating all of this success for your family and yourself? Do you see a day in there now where you overdid it? You started overdoing it? Are you able to look back and see that now?
When I look back, you're talking about before the big
Before
events.
the big, yes.
I don't believe in regret.
Mhm.
I believe that everything happens for a reason and everything happens for us. And when I look back, I was trying so hard to be everything to everybody because part of the upbringing too, was that we're always here for other people.
Right.
But no one taught me that if your cup is empty, you can't deliver that for yourself. And what filled my grandfather's cup was working with the earth, right?
Yeah.
And actually the art of growing. That isn't what filled my cup, right? And so it kind of, when I look back, I'm like, I don't think it's so much that I ignored that. I think it's that I never found what that meant for me
Gotcha.
as an individual, because I played soccer. It was a team sport. I was in medicine. Medicine is a team sport.
It is.
You know,
A lot of people
it
don't
takes
think of it
doctors.
that way, but it is.
It's a team sport. So everything I always did, I played the team sport, but I had never really, like, I had never become that individual and figured out what that individual fuel was for me when it wasn't in the context of other people. And so I can't say that I look back and I go, there was a pivotal point where it like tipped the scales. I just know that me as a human being, if you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to show you that I can, and I'm going to do it better than everybody else, because I'm
Yeah.
a high performer, high performing athlete. I played on the Olympic development program. You know, like that was, it's just, I love a challenge, and that's part of me too. And so I think that sports medicine in the 90s, there weren't a lot of women in it, and it was
Mm,
very hard to get in the door. And so I was going to do this. And a lot of people said, you can't do that. You can't do that with a family. You can't do that because you did. And so all of that fed into it. So it became I guess, a self-fulfilling prophecy, if I was to really consider it that way. But there's no one moment where it went over the edge. It just was like, I was so intrigued. I loved what I did. I loved doing the research. I loved being the best and helping people to be their best.
mhm.
That I just lost sight of the point where it was to my own detriment. I mean, to the health detriment in multiple ways. And then once you're there, you know, there's not a lot in healthcare specifically. Like, you can't talk about burnout. Like, that's
Right.
a no word. You can't talk about, you know what, I really don't care anymore. And as a human being who's an empath and who cares about people, like, that was what was eating me up inside, is like, I couldn't bring myself to care for human beings anymore because I was that burned out, you know? So I think it was just, I was blowing and going and didn't understand how to fill my cup. And now I
Mhm.
understand how to fill my cup so that the overflow flows into everybody else and everyone else. And so I think it's a skill set that I lacked and I was never taught, because
Mhm.
I was taught what that looked like for other people, but I never was taught, what does that look like for me?
Right. Right. And I can see that if you're like, I guess you would call it a type A personality where you're that real overachiever and go-getter, that that would be a more difficult thing. So for the people who are that type of person, how would you encourage them to reconnect with that part of themselves that is able to take a beat and give themselves some love?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because those are the people who I serve now. Like, I work with high performers who do all the things and have success, and then look around and go, what the heck? This isn't what
Right.
I thought it would be. And they're unfulfilled at the top. Like, those are my people. And whether they're entrepreneurs or they're, healthcare practitioners or whatever it is that they're doing in their life, the first thing I ask is the question that was asked to me. And I didn't learn this in any program. It's, what if money didn't exist and people didn't exist on this planet, it was only you, and you could do anything under the sun, but it has to be uniquely you, what would that be? And I help them to create kind of like a self-care menu,
Mhm.
because you can't go cold turkey. You can't go like, I'm blowing and going, I'm doing all the things, and then I'm going to go on a spiritual retreat. Like,
Right.
that's too big of a
Yeah.
and a lot of times you're like, well, I've got all the things. Like, you have to kind of baby step it. So I have them create that, what would you do? And give me something that takes 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10, 15. And I actually have them assign time values where, and I just asked them, I said, look at this and pick the one thing that you can commit to adding to your day. And we start there. And the reason that we start there is because when we're high performers and we're burned out, we can't see, we feel like there's no time for anything. There's no time left
Right.
over for me. But what we do is we carve out that little piece of time and make it a non-negotiable appointment. And if somebody wants to book that appointment, we say, you know what? I'm sorry, I have another client there. Whoops, that client is me. They don't have to know that.
That's right. They don't
So
have to
I
know
put it
that.
in, they don't have to know that.
Yeah.
And so I build it into their already like crazy schedule. And something that's really interesting happens when we take that time out for ourselves. We become more productive with the time when we're working because we've taken that, I call it like the personal breather. I call it a me time timeout. You know, we take those me time timeouts during our day, whether it's to just like go sit and breathe and do breath work for 2 minutes, or whether it's to close your eyes and do like a calm meditation or whatever it is that works for you, or maybe it's to read a chapter in a book. Whenever we take that like me time out, we reset and we refresh, and that's pouring into our cup. So when we come back out, we come out with a positive note, because I'll tell you what happens when we're burned out. Like, we're pouring from an empty cup, or worse, we're pouring from that. I'm going to use a wine analogy. Have you ever had a glass of wine and let it sit for 3, 4, or 5 days? It turns into vinegar. It turns into vinegar. So like the dregs at the bottom of our cup when we're burned out is vinegar, and we have the best intentions and we want to help people, but we're pouring out like that that we
Yeah.
have inside, and we don't realize it. It's like, not to get woo woo, but it's kind of an energetic, right?
Yeah.
They're not getting the best of us. We are not giving them 100% our best selves, because we're burned out.
Right.
So when we take that time and that me time out and we fill that cup, all of a sudden over time, that cup fills up, and then it's overflowing, and then everybody gets 100% amazingness from us.
Right.
And like, it takes you to a whole other level. It just takes you to another level, and people can sense that, especially when we're dealing with other people.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know I had a job one time and I had it was actually a cashier at Lowe's, and one of the head cashiers said to me one time, she's like, Dee, how do you do that? And I was like, how do I do what? And she goes, how do you stand there and be so nice to someone when they're on the other side of the counter being so rude to you? And I said, well, because I don't know what's going on with that person, for one thing. Obviously, there's something going on with them I mean, maybe their dog just died, or they just had a fight with their boyfriend or whatever. I said, but whatever it is that's going on, that's theirs, and they take that with them when they go. I'm not keeping it. I'm not holding on to it. So the last thing they need, if they're that grumpy, is for me to be grumpy back to them. They need me to be nice, And so that's what I would do, and you never know what's going on inside of someone by looking at them. That's how I feel. And it came so home to me this one day. This elderly lady came through my line, and she was dressed so nicely. And she was about to walk away, and something told me, just tell her how nice she looks. So I told her, and she stopped and she turned around and she goes, do I? And I go, yes, ma'am, you really do. And I'm probably going to get emotional, but she turned and she looked at me and she goes, my son just died, and sometimes I wonder how I'm doing. So we
Now you
just
got
don't
me.
know. Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And you know what that really brings to me? And this is so real, because this literally just happened this week in my life as well. People don't remember what you said.
Right.
They remember how you make them feel.
Right.
And you're right. We never know. Like, sometimes just the act of smiling someone, or seeing them, is enough to turn their day around. And
Right.
I need a tissue. You made me cry.
Sorry. Well, I'm not sorry. She was so beautiful.
But like, we never know. You're absolutely right. We never know. And when we're burned out, or when we personally are in an empty cup situation, we can't even perceive that about other
We
people.
can't. Right.
And the reality is, Dee, is that that's not who I am as a human being. So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if anybody's listening to this and are like, I'm burned out, I feel like I'm burning the candle at both ends, and I just have nothing left at the end of the day, today is your wake up call. Today is the day
Yes.
you say, okay, what do I need to do? Because that's not how we as human beings are designed. We are social creatures. We care
Yeah.
about other people. And if we can't bring ourselves to care, it does something really deep in this, like, I'm gonna get woo-woo now. It hits us in the soul, and it's not something that's an easy fix. We have to notice that and say, okay, what do I need to do to turn this trajectory around? Because I don't want to ever be the reason that somebody leaves an interaction with me feeling less than.
Right.
Like that's not who I am. And if I'm not being true to who I am, then I feel that intrinsically, but they do too.
They do.
They do. And, I truly believe that there's enough negative in the world. We don't need to add to it. We just don't need to add to it. And so when we do take control and we do fill our cup and we do take those actions to do self-care, and we start living, another woo phrase, but it's really not. When we start living in alignment with who we are at the
Yes.
deepest depths of us as human beings, and we stand in our purpose, if we don't find our purpose, there's a lot of things that happen in transition and you might lose sight of that. But if we don't know why we draw breath when we wake up in the morning, that's not normal. That's not a
Right.
normal place to be. And if someone's listening to this and they're like, I don't really know why I'm here, I'm just going through the motions, today's the day to find somebody to have a conversation with and drill deep, because we all have a purpose, and it doesn't have to be grand. I feel
Right.
like my person at this point in time is a legacy. It's grand. I feel called to do this because I've got these gifts. I'm a high performer, and I've got, like, everything I've done in life has trained me to do the things that I'm doing today. But for other people, it might be as simple as, I'm going to show up and be the absolute best human being for my family,
Mhm.
or I'm going to put food on the table. Like, our purpose doesn't have to be grand, but it has to be the right purpose for us
Right.
intrinsically, and then for others. And so, like, that's something that I had to learn, and I had to learn it when I was 40 years old.
Yeah.
Quite frankly,
Yeah.
because I taught that skill. But when we learn that and we stand in purpose, like, I'm going to tell you what I do every day. And I've shared this before on my television show and some other things, but every morning before I get out of bed, when I open my eyes, I have gratitude. Thank you for this day. I
Yeah.
am not 6 feet under, so this is a great gift. I express gratitude for my husband, who is in my life and is my person, and and whatever else I feel called to express gratitude for. But then I touch base with, why am I here, and how am I going to make that happen? How am I going to impact one life today? What am I going to commit to doing today that's going to have that impact? So that I'm always tuned in to my North Compass, right? My North Compass is, I'm here to help people. I believe I have a big purpose, and I have the ability to do it now. I didn't have the ability to do it 8 years ago or when I was building my career, but when we are blessed with gifts, it's our responsibility to share those gifts. And
Right.
so I always, every morning, tune into, why am I here? Why am I drawing breath? Thank you for the breath that I have. And what am I going to do to make sure that I'm living out this purpose? Because if you start that way and you touch base that way and you say, I'm going to take this action and that's going to make an impact, then you already know you're living and walking those steps, and everything else makes sense. It's kind of like everything else makes sense because you're now living in alignment with who you are as a human being.
Yeah. It does make a huge difference, and there wasn't always a point in my life either where I was, just kind of ask my soul, what is it you need? What is it you need to feed you today? And giving that to myself so that I can then give to other people. And my life is evolving. That's one of the reasons I named this podcast Eternal Evolution of Self, because I think we're constantly evolving, constantly becoming more aware of things about ourselves and how we can interact with other people that will have more impact on them. And so I think that's a great bit of advice, to ask yourself that question when you get up in the mornings. And gratitudes are life changing. I mean, they really, really, truly are. I do gratitude journaling, and it's the only journaling that I've ever been able to stick with. And I can't say I don't miss a day here and there, but, and I also think when you're doing gratitudes, we all kind of use those, what I refer to as comfortable standbys of family and friends and things like that. But I think if we can think a little bit deeper about it and realize that there are so many other things too that we can be grateful for, that just kind of, because when you allow your awareness to expand in that way, then it just keeps growing. It's like I follow some scientists and they say, that even the universe, when you notice what they perceive as the edge of it, it becomes not the edge anymore because it just keeps growing with that attention and that awareness to what is perceived as the edge. It just keeps expanding and it's just incredible. I mean, that's scientific. So, you know, for
You're
people who
you're
want to say, well,
absolutely
that's woo
right.
woo, it's scientifically backed woo.
Yeah, right. So
Yes.
I move in circles and they're very like like what is the tactic that's going to get me there?
Yes.
But you're touching on something beyond tactics. You're like, okay, so the other part of my morning is I touch base with why am I here and my gratitudes, but then I listen. I have silence as part of my morning routine. Before I do anything else, I sit in silence and I listen because I'm going to say this. And for some people, this might sound woo, but it's not. We have the answers intrinsically. They come to us, they are whispered to us. Whether we know it subconsciously, consciously or not, if we sit in silence, that's where the magic kind of happens. And so when we're taking those moments of reflection, all we have to do is ask the question. We can find the answers when we ask the question, but we have to be still and comfortable in the stillness and actually listen.
Right.
And that applies when we're in a conversation too, right? So many people in a conversation, you can ask the question or you start the conversation, but people listen to respond.
Yes.
But when we instead come from curiosity and ask the question and listen for understanding and perspective, it completely changes every human interaction. It kind of when we come from curiosity, what it does is it puts judgment in the back seat because it's
Hmm.
human nature to pass judgment. Well, none of us can pass judgment. We all have our own stuff. We've all been through
We
stuff.
do.
And we never know what that other person is experiencing because none of it, there's no two of us that have the same experience. But when we ask questions and we listen from curiosity and listen to understand unique perspective, it completely changes every human interaction. And so it helps us fill our cups as well, right? Because we're coming from that space. And once again, I mean, we said this earlier, both you and I had an example. People remember how we make them feel. And most people today are all they need is validation that they're a human being. Like they need to be heard, they need to be seen. And I was just talking to somebody the other day, when we're in our midlife, as women, and I'm just going to speak to a societal norm because this is not how I carry myself out, but society frowns on us allowing our gray hair to show. I've got
Mhm.
grays. I'm proud of it. I can't tell you how many times men are like, when are you going to dye that? I'm on television and I've got gray hair. And they're like, are you going to fix that? Are you going to touch up your roots? And I'm like, I don't understand why there is this push for us to stay eternally young. And then once you get to the grays, it's like you become invisible as a woman because you spend so much time trying to be invisible for different reasons because you don't want
Right.
the wrong kind of attention. And then you move to this phase in midlife where you're kind of invisible. In that way. And so many people live there, whether they're teens and going through this or midlife or elderly, it's the same. So many people just want to be seen and heard.
Yes.
And when we are able to ask questions and listen and let them share, it validates them as a human being and they remember that. That makes them feel good. It makes them feel valued.
Yes.
And so like I think that's something that it was taught to me at an early age. We went and did that. My grandfather instilled that in me. I told you that earlier. But how are we doing that in today's world when it's digital? And how can we love other human beings better? Like I love that question. I hate that it's not an okay question to ask in the workplace,
Right.
because to me as human beings, when we do that, we listen, we validate, we actually are listening for understanding. That solves a whole lot of conflict.
Yeah. And there's a few things that come up. First of all, I'm growing my grays out. You can see. It took me the first time I tried to do it, I got scared and backed out and dyed my hair again. But now it's like it's full on changing over to the natural color now. So it's good. And I embrace that. And I'm glad to see we're kind of trending a little bit away from that stereotypical women need to dye their hair thing. We can embrace that. I mean, most guys aren't dyeing their hair when they turn 50 and they've got all the grays in here and here.
It's
And
distinguished.
yes, it's
Societally, it's
distinguished.
distinguished for them to age, but it's not distinguished for us to age. I don't understand the double standard, but
Yeah, I don't understand the double standard either, but we can fix it. We're just going to be persistent and we're going to grow out our grays if we want to, if that brings us joy. And they'll either, accept it or they'll, look at somebody else that has their hair dyed. Whatever. It's fine. But oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. There was something else you said that I was going to say something about. Mm,
I
maybe
don't
it'll come.
know. I know we've talked about like validation. We were talking about validation and listening for understanding and how can I love you more?
Oh, I was going to say in the workplace, instead of saying, how can I love you better? Maybe you could change love to appreciate. How can I appreciate you better? Because especially, I mean, we all love to be appreciated in and out of the workplace, right? And Steve and I have talked about this so many times because um things that happen with his job. And I have a friend who has a job that where, she doesn't feel as appreciated. And I feel like when we're appreciated and when people let us know that through words or actions or both, then we're more willing to go the extra mile. I mean, it completely changes the internal dynamic in that workplace when you appreciate your employees, your coworkers, whoever it is, your boss, because some people are so like, I don't know, like they get so intimidated by the title behind the person's name that they forget that they can still treat them as a human being. I mean, and ask themselves, what would I want in this situation? What would I need in this situation? And then give that to that person. And it should be okay to be able to do that. I mean, barring the, physical contact, because that's, still a no-no in the workplace. You don't want to be hugging everybody because that can get a little awkward sometimes. So you have to be mindful of that. But as far as, just expressing that, buying lunch or, bringing in donuts in the morning or whatever it is, it can just be the smallest, simplest thing that shows that appreciation. And that is going to make a huge impact. So that was just a word suggestion that I had in my brain.
I really like that. And the thing that I come to is, we think about negotiation and almost all the books on negotiation are written by men.
Mhm.
But as females in negotiation, I flip the script and I do exactly that. I always think about the person across the table because a negotiation should never be a power struggle. It shouldn't be
Right.
a I win, you lose. And negotiate. I'm an investor and I buy businesses and I sell businesses and but every negotiation should be a win-win. So when we consider in our prep phase or when we ask, what is it that they want or need from this transaction? Like, what is it? And we put ourselves in their shoes. It allows for a much nicer negotiation path because we can position, we know what our non-negotiables are and what we need. I mean, if I'm buying a business, I need a fair market price. I'm not going to pay overvalue for a business because that doesn't make business sense.
Right.
But maybe they don't have an understanding of what fair market price is, but what they want is they want safety, security, and the ability to retire.
Yeah.
So we come to, I know where they're coming from, and it's blood, sweat, and tears. And unfortunately, in business, blood, sweat, and tears does not equal money.
Right.
It just
Unfortunately.
doesn't. Unfortunately, that's not the way of the world. But what is the business asset actually worth? And then what is it they're looking for? And sometimes it can look like, okay, great. Well, I will keep you on, or why don't you roll over some investments so you can continue to see dividends after, like instead of what we think it is, maybe we'll pay market value and then you remain an investor so you can see the growth of the business and it can help us both.
Right.
So like there's a lot of things to consider with that. So I really like that lens and we do it naturally, some of us, and other people, it's a skill set. It's a skill set that you can learn. But if we can understand in any human interaction, what does this person really need? I think we'd be in a much better place as
Yeah,
a global.
absolutely. We really would. And it kind of reminds me of a situation with a friend of mine that she was in at work. And when I first started talking to her about it, I didn't see that she wasn't just going to be able to leave that job and get another job that was going to be more supportive to her role. And in the end, the change she made inside of herself created this ripple effect across the other people that she worked with. And now it's a beautifully supportive environment. She's got a new title and she got a raise. I mean, it just turned into this amazing situation. And I told her, I'm like, in the beginning, I would have never seen that. Like, I would have never seen that as the way that it would turn out. And so it just goes to show you that just changing your internal energy can have this massive impact on people around you.
You are absolutely right. And I actually posted, I don't post stuff on social media like this very often, but I post on social media because on Monday of this week, I walked into a room of people who I see once a month regularly. And someone pulled me aside and he said, you know what? I know today is going to be a good day because you walked in the room, and always the positivity impacts me for the better. And, you know, like, this is somebody who I've seen every single month for 5 years, never really talks to me in the room. It's not, we're not, you know, it's a networking group, and we tend to stay within our power circles of who are the people doing business together or whatnot. It's just a container for that. So like that, really, you never realize how much you're putting out.
Yeah,
You just do it and you show up, and you don't need that. But that made me feel really good because I was like, oh, okay, this person who I rarely actually have a conversation with notices how I make other people feel,
right.
you know, and that's a that's exactly what you were describing. It's another ripple effect. So I think that's really, really fantastic. And you know, I couldn't be there if I didn't get coaching and didn't actually do the work myself to figure out who am I as a human being and how am I going to live in alignment and fill my cup so I can be that person.
Right.
Um, so yeah,
And
full
it's
circle.
worth the effort. You know, I think I was talking to someone else the other day about how there's a few words in the English vocabulary that I'd like to at least severely limit the way they can be used. And one of those words is hard, because we get told all the time that doing the inner work is hard. And if we keep using that term, then it's a deterrent, I feel, for people wanting to explore that area of themselves and do the work to find out what they really want and what means, impact to them or success to them or self-care to them or whatever the, concept is, you know, and I don't want to use that term. I think that it's worth the effort. It's worth the
Mhm.
time. It's worth the energy. You can go from that place of extreme overwhelm to, I mean, look at your face when you're talking to us. You absolutely glow. And and I know you weren't glowing back then because there's no way you
Oh,
could have
definitely not.
been, because your cup was empty and you can't. It's like, when a light bulb is fixing to blow out, if you ever see those street lamps, they're like dim and they're kind of flickering and stuff. They're not glowing. They're just kind of existing there in like this ambient light. You don't want to be an ambient light. You want to be this shining light, and you have that now. So that's where the work got you. So it was worth the effort and the energy that you put into it to get there. So I think that's something really important for people to realize.
You know, when you say that, I think about it as it's always an investment in yourself.
Yes.
Every investment you put into yourself yields the best dividends because you are always your best return on investment. People think about it in money and they think about money investment. It's not about that. If I invest in myself to learn and grow, if I invest and figure out what my priorities are and then schedule my non-negotiables into my calendar and set the boundary and say, nope, nobody's touching on my me time. That's my time for me
Yeah.
to fill my cup so I can continue to serve. Like, as long as you understand who you are and that your priorities evolve and set those non-negotiables, that's an investment in yourself that's going to pay so many dividends.
Yes.
You know, my life looks completely different today, and some people, I'm still people's life goals, but they have no idea. Like, it's a completely different feeling because I now understand how to say no in a way that builds relationships rather than breaking them down,
Right.
that sets and maintains and honors my boundaries so that I can do the work that I was put on this earth to do, or that I believe I was put on this work to do, earth to do. So, you know, I think it's an investment in ourselves. And yes, it does take time and effort, but the dividends are out there for everybody to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're seeing it. I mean, that comment you just made is case in point, because people are seeing it and we don't realize how people are seeing us. they're seeing us way more than what we realize they are. Like you would have never known that had he not come up to you and said that, but he's probably been thinking that for quite some time before he let it come out. So I think that's a
Absolutely. And
beautiful.
you never know the impact you have on someone else's life. People
Yeah,
remember how you make them feel. And if we
yeah,
improve that for another human being, guess what? That could save a life, honestly. It could be
absolutely.
saving, you could be saving a life, or at least transforming
Absolutely.
it.
Yes, transformation is amazing too. I love it. So, oh my gosh, Jen, this has been such an amazing conversation. I'm so glad you came on as a guest today. I've enjoyed this so much. Your insights have been incredible, and I hope that they're reaching every single person they need to reach right now. I know that they are. I just, man, I just feel this in my soul so much. Oh my gosh. So I appreciate you. Please tell people where they can find you if they would like to have you as their coach.
Yeah, so the best way to reach out to me is actually going to be on social media, on LinkedIn or on Facebook. Jen Gaudet, Gaudet. If you search it, you'll find it. You can also go to my website, which is Jen Gaudet, Gaudet, one N, Jen Gaudet coaching .com, and you can reach out to me there. But I am here to serve, and I really, really encourage anybody. If you were listening today, today's the day to decide, number one, what is it that makes my soul happy? What is it that fills my cup? And how can I fill my cup to overflowing? And if you can't answer that, find somebody. It doesn't have to be me, but find somebody who can walk you through the process so that you can set your boundaries and really reclaim the life that you deserve and that you are meant to live. Because when we do that, like, the ripple effect impacts so many more people. So I'm happy to talk to anybody. Social media is the best way to get me because I actually check my DMs there. So
That's awesome. And I'll drop all that information in the description box below the video so y'all can get in contact with Jen. And as always, please like, share, and subscribe so we can get this message out far and wide to everyone who needs it. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate you so much. And as always, I love you all.